On to the Thermographic Diagnostic Imaging and Health Through Awareness webinar. My name is Leisha Getson and I will be your host. Before we begin, just a little housekeeping. The presentation will be about 50 to 60 minutes followed by a Q&A. You should be able to hear me and the speaker as well as follow along with the PowerPoint presentation. To the right of your screen, you will see a little chat box. If you have any questions, type it in there and submit it, and we'll be getting to as many questions at the end of the webinar as possible. If for some reason you get cut off, don't worry, the webinar will be archived with the PowerPoint available. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Susan Silberstein this evening. I'm so honored and privileged to have her on our show. She's going to be giving us all kinds of wonderful information. Susan is the founder and educational director of BeatCancer.org, a national speaker on nutrition and cancer, and the creator of the Holistic Cancer Certification Training Course. She's also the author of several books, including Hungry for Health and Kitchen Chemotherapy. She personally counseled over 25,000 cancer patients. It's amazing, providing continuing education for thousands of health professionals and trained nearly 60,000 prevention seekers. That is absolutely amazing, and I can say firsthand, when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, we took her to see Susan Silberstein, and you really were, Susan, a calm in the storm, and provided such wonderful information, but just that steady presence that you have, I can't tell you how much it meant to us. So thank you, and we're so excited to hear what you have to share.
Thank you so much, Leisha. I appreciate the invitation to be with you this evening. So as our listeners have heard, I work in the cancer field, and many of my patients have said to me, I don't understand how I got sick because I've always eaten healthy. And I have two answers for those people. Number one, disease may not be so much about what you're eating as what's eating you. They're kind of flip sides of the same coin, and that's apparently why stress spelled backwards is desserts. Or maybe it means if you're stressed, you get to eat dessert. I'm not sure. And number two answer. There are probably as many definitions of healthy eating as there are people trying to define it. So tonight we're going to be talking about 4 basics of healthy eating that our listeners can sink their literal and figurative teeth into. Now, the media have us playing dietary roulette with all of those fad diets out there, and I'm sure most of you have heard about the Atkins diet and the Zone diet and the Rave diet and the South Beach diet. There's a Hollywood diet, a Weight Watchers diet, Jenny Craig diet, the Paleo diet, the macrobiotic diet, the ketogenic diet, the grapefruit diet. There's a doctor's cookie diet. It gets better. There's even an ice cream diet. Sign me up for that one. The Eat Right for Your Blood Type diet, the Eat Right for Your Astrological Sign diet. We've got the high carb, low fat diet, the high protein, low carb diet. Are you confused yet?
I am.
We all are, okay? So how do you sort it all out? Well, we could ask our doctors, but except for the doctors that are participating tonight, that might not help much because physicians generally tell their patients to ignore all the hype and just eat a balanced diet. And I'm all for ignore all the hype, but the truth is most doctors can't define what a balanced diet really is. And that's because they never really studied nutrition in medical school. But medical school curricula aside, the information is definitely out there, first in the scientific journals and then in the lay press. And this was the cover story of Newsweek magazine several years ago. The perfect diet beyond the fads, what science tells us about food and health. And more nutritional science investigations have been pointing to a significant connection between our diets and our health. And one thing is becoming abundantly clear, and that is that Americans are not very healthy. 1,500 of us die from cancer every single day. 1 in 8 American women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. Over 1 million Americans have a heart attack every year. 1/4 of Americans have hypertension. 1/3 of all Americans suffer from arthritis. And here are some more unhealthy statistics. 25 million Americans have cancer. 41 million have high cholesterol. Not surprisingly, 41 million have heart disease. 50 million Americans have high blood pressure. 29 million have diabetes. And within 2 generations, that number is expected to triple because there are actually 86 million pre-diabetics in this country. 65% of American adults are overweight, which obviously will contribute to all 3 of the killer diseases we just mentioned. And according to the World Health Organization, 75% of all deaths in this country are diet-related. In fact, according to the Centers for Disease Control, 75% of all healthcare dollars are spent on diseases that you and I could prevent. Our government is constantly debating about the merits of our healthcare system, and I say we don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a disease care system.
Yeah.
And by the way, the statistics that we just mentioned are not just true of the elderly. More young people between the ages of 20 and 44 are taking heart medications than ever before. The scientific evidence shows that not only are Americans digging themselves into their graves with their forks, they are digging very early graves. Our children are increasingly unhealthy. 1 out of 2 born today will develop heart disease. 1 in 2.5 will get cancer sometime in their lifetime. 1 in 6 U.S. children is obese. Since the 1980s, childhood obesity has more than tripled. Children at the age of 3 already have fatty deposits in their arteries. By age 12, 3/4 of all American children have the beginning of hardening of the arteries. And of those children born since 2000, the millennials, 50% of them will have developed adult onset type 2 diabetes before their 30th birthday. This is the first generation of children that will not outlive their parents. It doesn't mean they'll die sooner than their parents, but they will die younger. And why is that? Largely because of their diets. You know, it doesn't take an arms inspector to spot one of the most dangerous weapons of mass destruction facing our kids today. It's the school lunch, loaded with saturated fat and refined carbohydrates, filled with empty calories, and devoid of any real nutrition. In fact, the standard American diet is very SAD. We are overfed but undernourished. Our diets are calorie rich but certainly nutrient poor. In fact, a 3-day study conducted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture showed that out of 21,500 people, not a single one consumed the recommended daily amount for 10 essential nutrients. And of course, the RDA is pitifully low, just enough to prevent a deficiency disease like scurvy or rickets. Basically, the RDA is the nutritional equivalent of the minimum wage. And who wants to settle for that? Now, one of the serious problems with the American diet is portion distortion. So we have the Whopper and the giant size and the jumbo meal, and Americans are simply eating 2 to 4 times the amount of food that they actually require. Now, the Department of Agriculture has been trying to help, and over the years they've come up with various food guide pyramids. The latest one was pretty good. It's online, interactive, and the bands vary depending on the physical activity and the caloric requirements of the individual involved. Unfortunately, don't try to find this pyramid online because mypyramid.gov has now morphed into myplate.gov. Now, the plate is pretty good. As you can see, the left side, which is roughly 50%, is all fruits and vegetables. There's only one problem. Pyramids and plates don't prevent disease. Only healthy habits do. And so despite the latest, most modern, most technologically advanced information, the best advice is still the oldest, and that brings me to my first principle of healthy eating: eat primitive. Now, that's what we learned from biological anthropologist Dr. Lauren Cordain. That's what we learned from Drs. Boyd Eaton and Melvin Connor, who in 1985 published an article in the New England Journal of Medicine entitled Paleolithic Nutrition. And just in case you don't happen to have a copy of that journal on your coffee table, I'm going to summarize a few of the highlights. Okay, now according to research, humanity has been around as a genus for maybe 2 million years. We've been around as the Homo sapiens species for about 40,000 years. And all that time, we ate a consistent way, the hunter-gatherer society diet, until roughly about 200 years ago. What happened then? The Industrial Revolution came along, and modern food processing techniques, which began refining the Western diet and stripping it of most of its nutrients before shoving it into boxes and cans and bags. But think about this. 2 centuries are a mere drop in the proverbial evolutionary bucket. Hardly enough time for our genes to adapt to this dramatic departure from long-established dietary patterns. The results? Chronic killer diseases like heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, which are virtually unknown in third world countries and cultures that still consume a primitive diet. And just what is that diet? Well, mostly plants, roots and fruits, greens and beans, seeds and weeds, and basically raw, plus a little bit of wild game and fish thrown in. What do we eat today? Meats and sweets, pies and fries, chips and dips, cakes and shakes. Quite different. You put a traditional eater in the supermarket, and with the exception of the fish and produce aisles, she's not likely to find anything that she actually recognizes as food. The cells of our bodies are in exactly the same predicament. Now, one key difference between the modern and the primitive diet is the fat content, especially saturated animal fats, which definitely contribute to chronic degenerative diseases. And the foods high in fat, of course, include the fries, the fried chicken, the hamburgers, the steak, the pork, all the dairy products, and chips and donuts. As I often say, double cheeseburger, triple bypass. Or another way to say it is the golden arches are one step before the pearly gates. Now, about 10 years ago, the film called Super Size Me came out, documenting the near disastrous health consequences experienced by a young man who ate 3 meals a day for 30 days straight in a fast food restaurant. And of course, since fast food and the golden arches have moved to Asia, so have obesity and cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. The China-Oxford-Cornell Diet and Health Project, which is the world's most comprehensive study of diet, health, and disease ever completed, found very strong correlations between the changeover in China from the traditional Asian plant-based diet to a Western diet of meat and dairy and fat, and significant increases in obesity and chronic degenerative disease in that country. Now, the meat that our ancestors ate was a very different animal from what we consume today, especially as relates to fat. Now, in the primitive diet, a typical piece of meat had less than 4% total calories coming from fat. Out of that small amount, only 35% was the dangerous saturated fat, and a full 65% came from the more protective unsaturated fats. If we look at the modern piece of meat, we've got 40 or 50% total calories coming from fat, of which 99% is saturated, leaving only 1% for the unsaturates, right? And then let's talk briefly about those unsaturates. Most people have heard of omega-3s and 6s and 9s, right? And they're all valuable for our health, and most foods are combinations of those fats. But if the ratios are crucial. Too many omega-6 fats will suppress immune function, whereas a lot of omega-3 fats will enhance immune function. Now, we should have a nice balance of both, and in the primitive diet, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio was this lovely 1-to-1. But in the typical modern diet, we have an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of about 25-to-1. That's going to be 25-to-1 against your immune system. Mm-hmm. So let's see who's who. Now, those omega-6s, remember, too many of them are going to do a number on our immune system. So those are the express concentrated oils like sunflower and safflower and soybean oil, corn oil and cottonseed oil, a couple of other oils. Anything you buy that's made in pure vegetable oil, you can be sure that's pure omega-6. Now, where do we get the really good fats, those omega-3 immune boosters? From wild fish and the sea veggies they consume in the wild. Wild game, grass-fed animals, free-roaming hens and their eggs, raw walnuts, raw pumpkin seeds, and fresh ground flax and hemp and chia seeds. Now, there's lots more to say about fats, but I want to move on because we have so much more to discuss. Another difference between the primitive and the modern diet is that the primitive diet was very high in phytonutrients, or natural plant chemicals, that have ultimately become the buzzwords of modern nutritional research. Terms like antioxidants and bioflavonoids and sulforaphanes and isoflavones and lignans and indoles, carotenoids and enzymes, etc. Now, for example, researchers have found up to 10,000 separate phytonutrients in one apple, up to 12,000 potentially in one tomato. And a little bit later, we'll talk exactly about how to optimize those levels. And the final difference between the primitive and the modern diet, the primitive diet was unadulterated. So there were no xenobiotics or chemical additives, no added growth hormones, no pesticides or herbicides, no bioengineering, no irradiation, no charbroiling. God knows no microwaving, in fact, no stoves. Now, at this point in my talk, people usually want to know, isn't a microwave oven good for anything? Absolutely. Microwave ovens make excellent boat anchors. If you don't have a boat, that's okay. Just unplug the oven, open the door, store all your healthy cookbooks in there. To speak about the nutritional value of microwaving is to speak in oxymorons. There isn't any. Microwaving changes the chemical bonding and molecular structure of every food and beverage it touches. At best, it creates compounds that the body doesn't recognize as food, and at worst, it creates immunosuppressive, mutagenic, and carcinogenic compounds. And if our listeners are interested in the German and Swiss and Russian research, I can make that available to them. But in a nutshell, the top reasons not to microwave include the fact that microwaving causes brainwave disturbances, it produces unknown byproducts, it makes it difficult to break the nutritional compounds in the foods down, it can create hormone imbalances, reduce the nutritional content of food. It can produce these carcinogenic free radicals that can lead to stomach or intestinal and colon cancers. We've also seen increased blood cancers in heavy microwavers. Microwaving can create deficiencies in immune response, loss of memory and concentration. It definitely decreases bioavailability of nutrients like vitamins. It denatures proteins that are cooked in microwave ovens, and it causes a loss in vital energy in food. In fact, a study published about 10 years ago in the journal The Science of Food and Agriculture found that if we steam a head of broccoli, we might lose about 10% of the vital antioxidants in that food. But broccoli zapped in a microwave oven lost up to 97% of its antioxidants. All right, we better move on to some good news now. So let's talk about our second principle of healthy eating. Eat colorful. Now, what color is the typical Western diet? Well, it's white, right? So we've got white flour and white sugar and white bread and white milk and white cheese and white pasta and white rice and white potatoes. No color. Now, a meta-analysis of nearly 24 studies showed that processed refined carbohydrates, which are the white ones, increase the risk of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease even more than fat does. Most chronic diseases of Western civilization have been tied to refined carbohydrates. In fact, just last year, a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association looking at close to 12,000 participants. Those who consumed the least amount of calories from added sugars, as compared with those who had the most amount of added sugars in their diet, were actually half as likely to die of disease during the follow-up period than the group that was the lowest group, right? Than the group that was the highest group. So twice as likely to die of serious disease if you're in the 21+% of consumption of refined carbohydrates that have been added, not the natural ones in fruits and vegetables. And cow dairy consumption has been linked to asthma and arthritis and diabetes and leukemia, lymphoma, and cancers of the breast, prostate, and ovary. Now, do you realize that cow's milk has only one job? And that's to turn a 50-pound calf into a 1,200-pound bull. Do you know we're the only animal species that consumes another species' milk? So that means we're right and the entire animal kingdom is wrong? I don't think so. I find that utterly ridiculous. And what's more, we do that way past the weaning age, which in human years is roughly age 2. We consume dairy products way into our adult years. So first we grow vertically, and then we grow horizontally, and then we grow sick. So what can we substitute? Well, there's all those plant milks like almond and coconut and cashew milk, hemp seed milk, rice and soy milks, for example. And how do you get a colorful diet? Well, you've just basically got to consume tons of fruits and vegetables. And fruits and vegetables are crucial for disease protection. Tens of thousands of studies demonstrate the importance of fruits and vegetables to our health. Nearly 8,000 studies show that whole fruits and vegetables are associated with a lower risk of at least 15 different types of cancer. A meta-analysis, which is a research study of the research studies, looked at 170 studies done in 17 different nations, and the scientists concluded that people who eat the most fruits and vegetables have half the cancer rates of those who eat the least. Researchers at Loma Linda University School of Public Health studied 600,000 Seventh-day Adventists and observed longer than average lifespans with lower incidence of heart disease and cancer among those vegetarians on a heavily plant-based diet. Several studies have shown a connection between the consumption of fruits and vegetables and body weight. A study of more than 43,000 males over a 12-year period showed that eating a Mediterranean diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and fish actually cuts in half the chance of developing chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And an Oxford University study showed that a diet high in fruits and vegetables decreased blood pressure. The studies just go on. And according to this slide from the World Health Report, up to 2.7 million deaths could potentially be saved if consumption of fruits and vegetables were increased, including 1.8 million deaths from heart disease, nearly 500,000 from stroke, and over 360,000 deaths from cancer. The EPIC study, the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer, had many conclusions, one of which was that if we increase our fruit and vegetable intake by only 150 grams a day, which is the equivalent of one small apple, we could prevent more than 36,000 cases of cancer annually in the U.S. and worldwide more than 300,000 cases every single year. So the news is not that fruits and vegetables are good for you. We know that. The news is they're so good for you that they could actually save your life. Now, I'm sure our listeners have heard of the 5-a-day campaign that came from the U.S. Department of Agriculture many years ago. And the idea is that if you eat 5 fish-sized servings of fresh fruits and vegetables, that's going to be really important for your health. Now, that's hard enough for some of us to do, but you may not be aware that the new guidelines are now 13 servings, and if you microwave them, you get negative points. But unfortunately, what are the top vegetables consumed in this country? Well, I'll look at the number 4, iceberg lettuce. Now that's mostly water and the rest hardly qualifies for green. Let's take a look at onions. That's mostly in ring form that's been breaded and fried. Tomatoes, which we get mostly in ketchup. Now, you know, ketchup was officially declared a vegetable in 1971 by President Reagan. So it qualifies in the school lunch program as a vegetable. And the worst, biggest offender of all, of course, potatoes, mostly as French fries. Now, I have to say, if I'm going to do fries, it's certainly not going to be from a white potato. It'll be sweet potato fries. And that is because fruits and vegetables get their colors from the carotenoids, which is a large class of natural plant chemicals, not just beta-carotene. There are actually 600 different carotenes. They're not just in carrots. They're not just in orange fruits and vegetables. We have carotenes that are red and yellow and purple and green and great. Why do we care? 2 key reasons. Number 1, carotenes support our immune system in many, many different ways, and they support our antioxidant system, which will help neutralize the free radicals that damage our cellular DNA with tens of thousands of hits per cell per day. Now, the colorful diet is also rich in fiber, foods like whole grains and fresh fruits and veggies, seeds and nuts and beans and legumes and sea vegetables. Fiber can bind up and escort out, as we know, cancer-causing hormones and chemicals. Low fiber has been connected to colon cancer, but also breast and prostate and lymphatic cancers. Just as likely it is to be a factor in cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and arthritis. As a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, Dr. Dennis Burkitt used to say, small stools, large hospitals. Now, another phytonutrient that is plentiful on this planet is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is one of the most powerful wound healers and blood builders known to mankind, and that's because its molecular structure is nearly identical to that of hemoglobin, except that the magnesium is replaced by iron. And note this important quotation from Dr. Hajiwara: man has overlooked the power of green. Since the beginning of life on Earth, no animal has been able to live without green. Now, another aspect of the colorful diet, pig out on crucifers. The cruciferous family or brassica family includes plants like cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower and bok choy and Brussels sprouts and kale and collard greens. And these plants have many anti-cancer properties due primarily to their indole and sulfur compounds that help neutralize dangerous hormones and carcinogens, in fact, in a matter of days. They are particularly protective against breast and prostate and bladder and lung cancer, both risk for those cancers and aggressiveness of those cancers. Let's move on to our third nutrition secret. Eat alkaline. A key principle of health is acid-alkaline balance. Now, this slide shows a pH range, and that should be a capital H. That stands for potential of hydrogen, which is a measure of acidity or alkalinity. So it shows a pH range of 0 to 14. 0 being the most acid, and 14 being the most alkaline, and 7 being neutral in the middle. Now, cancer and most diseases thrive in acidosis. The body does not start to heal until the intracellular pH is to the right of neutral at about 7.3 or 7.4. Now, a few important facts you ought to know. First of all, this scale is logarithmic. A pH of 7 is 10 times more alkaline than a pH of 6. A pH of 8 is 100 times more alkaline, and a pH of 9 is 1,000 times more alkaline than a pH of 6. A well-known cola has a pH of 2.5, and many coffees have pHs of 2 or 3. So that's going to be over 10,000 times more acid than most tap waters and 100,000 times more acid than what our blood needs to be. With a low pH diet, the blood has to rob minerals from our bones to maintain required alkalinity. The body works very hard, sometimes to exhaustion, to maintain consistent homeostasis and pH in the blood. So the more alkaline foods and water we consume, the easier it is on our bodies. This is a fascinating slide. This was Japanese research on 40,000 baby chicks. All received exactly the same feed, but one group was given regular water and the other group was given alkaline water. After only 1 month, the mortality rate of the chicks on the alkaline water was 1/8 the rate of the other water group. And after 2 months, there was a 34% reduction in inappropriate blood sugar levels. The cholesterol levels also dropped, and after only 15 days, the number, size, and weight of cancerous tumors were 50% lower in the alkaline water group as compared with the regular group. So we can drink alkaline water, preferably between meals, by the way, and we can certainly eat alkaline foods at meals. Now, our ideal diet should be made up of about 80% of alkaline foods by volume, and they would come mostly from plant sources, and only about 20% acidifying foods by volume coming from animal source foods for the most part. And if we can strike that optimum 80-20 balance, that can result in wonderfully normalized weight levels, dramatic increases in energy, and significant disease protection. So more specifically, which foods are acidifying and which ones are alkalinizing? Well, on this chart, the acid foods are in red and the alkaline foods are in green. So the amino acids, the proteins like meat, fish, fowl, and dairy, right? The starches and sugars, the fats, and then we have, they're all acid, and then we have that lonely little class of fresh fruits and vegetables that can help alkalinize our body. Now, let's think about that 80-20 ratio, and now let's look at the typical American diet. Well, it's about 99% acid. Typical American, right? Typical American breakfast. Bacon and eggs, waffles and syrup, cereal and milk, coffee and Danish, all acid. Maybe it's just coffee and toast. That's acid with a capital A. Typical lunch. Ham and cheese sandwich, slice of pizza, mac and cheese, a hamburger on a bun with French fries. More acid. And the typical dinner. Meat and potatoes, spaghetti and meatballs, chicken and rice, maybe a token string bean. So, we are eating a heavily acid diet, and if the researchers are right, and we are eating this way, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, decade after decade after decade, is it any wonder the disease statistics are what they are? Nope, it's a wonder any of us are still alive. All right, that's a testimonial to how hard the body does work for us. We just need to give it a fighting chance. Finally, our fourth principle of nutritional health, eat organic. Now, certified organic foods, of course, leave out a lot of the contaminants, and we talked about these when we were reviewing the primitive diet. So the GMOs and the pesticides and the herbicides and the synthetic fertilizers and the hormonal additives and the artificial colors and flavors and preservatives and antibiotics. But eating organic is not just about what's left out. It's specifically about what's left in. Plants absorb about 67 nutrients from the soil, but ordinary fertilizers only replenish about 3. Organic farmers compost the soil, so they plow in the trace minerals. They often use crop rotation techniques, so the same plant doesn't deplete the same nutrients from the same soil year after year. And they also occasionally use the Old Testament principle of letting the land lie fallow 1 year in 7, so it can replenish its nutritional stores. Now, you might have heard of the Stanford study that says, no, there's no difference, but let's look at some of the other research. Now, this study, see where'd it go? There it is. Compared the nutritional quality of organic versus conventionally grown fruits, vegetables, and grains. Researchers found 17% more vitamin C in organic lettuce, 52% more vitamin C in organic spinach, and higher amounts of nutritionally significant minerals in the organic plants than in their conventional counterparts. Now, this next study compared the total phenolic content of berries grown organically and conventionally. Now, we like phenols. Phenols are these wonderful plant chemicals with potent antioxidant and anti-cancer activity. Organically grown berries, not surprisingly, had higher levels of total phenols. In a 4-year European Union study published in 2007, researchers found that organic fruits and vegetables contain up to 40% more antioxidants than conventional produce and higher levels of minerals like iron and zinc than conventional produce. In 2008, the USDA did its famous blueberry study, and researchers found 68% higher phenol content, 59% higher anthocyanin content, and 50% greater antioxidant capacity in the organic blueberries. And then this study, this is an older study, the Fearman-Bear report from Rutgers University School of Agriculture, comparing mineral content in vegetables grown organically versus in non-organic soil. And if you follow some of the circles here, let's take a look at that top circle. The magnesium content of snap beans, 60 parts per million in the organic plants, less than 15 in the non-organic. Second circle down, calcium content of cabbage, 60 parts per million versus 17. Third circle down, the potassium content of lettuce, 176 parts per million versus 53 or 4. And just look at the iron content of tomatoes. Organically grown tomatoes had 1,938 parts per million of iron, and the non-organic tomatoes, 1.
Wow.
So what are we going to say if you can't find or you can't afford organic produce in your stores? Number 1, do the best you can. If you can't get organic, at least eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Number 2, focus on buying fruits and vegetables that are organic for which you eat the skin or the peel, like apples versus avocados. If you have to let them go, let them go. But the apples, you want to eat the peels. And number 3, you could even grow your own. There is a simple chemical-free, soil-free, even sunlight-free growing system where you can get fantastic produce. And if you want to know about that, I'll be able to provide a resource. Okay, so let's summarize our 4 nutrition secrets. Does everybody remember them?
Mm-hmm.
Eat primitive, eat colorful, eat alkaline, and eat organic. So what exactly is our take-home message here? Well, it's the 4F principle. Forget the fads, follow the fundamentals. And that is the message that we've been teaching at beatcancer.org since I founded the nonprofit Center for Advancement in Cancer Education more than 38 years ago. And our mission is to reduce cancer suffering by providing research-based education on how to prevent, cope with, and beat cancer through diet, lifestyle, and other immune-boosting approaches. Since 1977, we're proud to have provided diet and lifestyle training to over 60,000 prevention seekers, continuing education to thousands of healthcare professionals, and I'm honored that Dr. Phil and Leisha took my training in person, and individualized counseling on a donation basis and by telephone nationwide to nearly 30,000 cancer patients. Now, we differ from the other well-known and better endowed cancer organizations in three fundamental ways. Number one, our prevention programs offer true prevention, not just awareness and early detection. Number two, we focus on building up the patient, not just on destroying the tumor. And number three, we raise money for education, not research. Frankly, billions of dollars have been raised for research, and much of that research has been completed and published. We teach people what the scientific literature says and how to apply it in their daily lives. Personally, I don't think we need to raise more money for that elusive search for the cure, because prevention is the cure. Now, I encourage our listeners to visit the beatcancer.org website, sign up if they haven't already to receive our free e-newsletter and educational updates, learn about all of our programs and services, read hundreds of articles that we've published on our site, and perhaps even get involved as a volunteer or a donor or an ambassador. And if our listeners would like to review these fundamental principles of healthy eating, they are summarized in the introduction of my first recipe book, Hungry for Health. And in its sequel, Hungrier for Health, I include 4 more advanced principles of nutritional health. Now, the first book, Hungry for Health, the recipes are heavily plant-based, but they're not totally vegetarian. Hungrier for Health is totally vegan. Both are free of cow dairy and refined sugar and red meat and gluten. And the guiding principles in both of these books, the recipes have to be really, really helpful, really simple to prepare, and they have to really taste delicious. And even the desserts in these books are so nutritionally dense that they're better for you than if you didn't eat dessert at all. I think that's a good deal, right?
Yes, for sure.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Philip and Leisha Getson for this opportunity to share with you information about which I'm extremely passionate. And I'd like to close my formal remarks with 2 of my favorite quotations. This ancient Chinese proverb, "Whatsoever is the father of disease, poor diet is the mother." And this quotation from the father of medicine, "Natural forces within us are the true healers. Let your food be your medicine, and let your medicine be your food."
Wow, well said. Thank you very much, Susan. That just the information is put forth so eloquently but simply. I mean, it's very digestible, if you will, and I think it's our responsibility to maintain our health to prevent disease, as you were saying.
Well, it's an opportunity. And, you know, when people talk about taking responsibility for their health, some people interpret that as blame, and that leads to guilt. I think about it as responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
So if we can create awareness and knowledge, we can create power.
Right. Yeah.
And most doctors are just trying to fix us if we're broken. I like the doctors that I'm talking to tonight because you guys want to teach us how to stay out of trouble.
Yes, that's what we're trying to do, as are you. Well, we've got some questions. Are you ready to take a few questions?
I will do what I can to reply to these questions.
Okay. So first we have Renee. She's asking, when we eat vegetables, what is the best way to eat them?
Good question. I told you how not to eat them, right? So the best way would be juiced, steamed in a steamer basket, not in the water but over the water, or steam fried, where you're pushing them around in a pan with some water and then maybe adding some oil at the end, preferably not cooking with the oil, although sometimes we just need to do that. Right. And if we can tolerate the roughage, then we can go with lots of raw fresh fruits and vegetables.
When you juice, do you have something that you do with the pulp, the remaining pulp?
Yes, because it's very important for people to understand that there's a difference between juiced and blended produce. They are both valuable, and we have an article on our Beat Cancer site. If you type in juicing in the search bar, you will come up with that article that explains the distinction. And so if we're juicing, we are literally removing the pulp. So if anyone has digestive issues and the doctor makes it clear that they can't handle raw fruits and vegetables, they can actually heal those inflamed intestinal tissues by extracting the juice from the fiber, and then that goes right into the bloodstream and doesn't have to be processed through the GI tract. And so, again, back to the question, what are we going to do with the pulp if we're doing true juice extracting? Sometimes we just put it through again and get more juice. Sometimes we put the pulp in our plants or in our garden. And sometimes we can use it as a basis for a soup.
That's what I was thinking, soup.
Yeah. So there are lots of things that you can do. Of course, the higher quality the juicer, the fewer nutrients remain behind in the pulp. But I have to say that the best juicer is thousands of dollars and a huge footprint, and just not something that I'm willing to deal with.
Okay. What is the best way to get alkaline water? I usually drink filtered water, or I drink smart water or Fiji water.
Okay. Well, out of the three, Fiji water is the only one that I know to be alkaline. There are ways to test the alkalinity of your water, but Fiji water is about 7.5. You could get Evermore, which is 8.5. You could buy essential water that is 9.5. If your listeners are in the Philadelphia and South Jersey or Delaware areas, then my husband and I are happy to share with you the 9.5 water that we bring in by the pallet and sits in our garage, which comes from a high glacier spring in northern Wisconsin. You can also purchase an alkalizing water treatment system. Some are quite expensive. I've been able to identify some that are only a few $100s that produce high quality water. And you can even buy Alkalife drops that you can put in filtered or purified water to help turn it alkaline, and you can carry them around in your pocket or your purse. And at the very least, ask for some lemon wedges when you're in a restaurant and squeeze that into the water that you're drinking.
Okay, those are great ideas. That's Alkalife drops?
Alkalife.
Okay. Okay, next question. What about hypothyroid and raw veggies?
Right. Well, that is an issue, and we cover that also on our website in the blog articles. The biggest issue is the cruciferous vegetables. However, I have found that there are other reasons why the thyroid may function low, and there are ways to address that. If you put thyroid in the search bar, you will, on beatcancer.org homepage, you will see some of that information as well.
Okay, and I just have to say I have been on your website many times, and it's just an awesome website with so much information, so easy to navigate. So take a look at it.
Well, I don't take any credit for that.
Well, whoever's doing it is doing a great job.
But if you see an article on our site, any of our listeners, that you think is worthwhile, well, share it on the social media platforms so that we can get the word out, not only about the information, but about beatcancer.org and its programs and services.
Yes. A couple of people saying what a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. And then another question. Yes, please tell us about the growing method for organic fruits and vegetables.
Okay, so obviously in the summertime you can grow your own outside, but in the wintertime that's not going to work. If you know a person who distributes the Juice Plus products in your area, their newest product addition to the product line is something called the Tower Garden. It has a very small footprint. It's vertical rather than horizontal, plugs into any outlet, and you can learn from them. If not, if you email me, I will send you information on a website that info@beatcancer.org is the easiest way to get to me, and I'll be happy to share with you a website.
Okay, great. What are your thoughts about nightshades?
Well, nightshades, and let's be clear what we're talking about, right? So that's going to be the tobacco and eggplant and peppers and what else is a nightshade?
Tomatoes?
Tomatoes and potatoes, right. And the nightshades can be very inflammatory in people who are sensitive to them. And that typically I've seen is among rheumatoid arthritics. So if you are consuming a lot of those foods and are feeling arthritic, the first thing I would do is give up all the nightshades and see if you feel very different in a couple of weeks. I can also produce an osteoarthritis just overnight if I get into the dairy products.
Oh, right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. What do you think? Did I ask you about fermented foods? What do you think about fermented foods?
Oh, well, we've got a whole series on our website about fermented foods. One we just put up yesterday, so check that out as well. Fermented foods, and we're not talking about food that you left out of the refrigerator and it went bad.
Yeah.
But fermented foods and vegetables can be extremely helpful for gut health, and you know about 75% of our immune system lies in the gut, and so the probiotics and prebiotics that we get and the healthy gut flora that come from these fermented foods can be extremely healing. One thing that's kind of interesting is that Polish women who are living in their native land and eating a lot of sauerkraut have very low rates of cancer. But when they move to the United States and adopt that Western diet and give up the crucifers and especially the fermented cabbage family, they end up getting cancer at the same rate we do.
Wow. It's unbelievable. Okay, so what are your personal thoughts on consuming grass-fed organic beef and organic poultry?
Much better than the alternative, right?
Right, yeah.
Some people need to have a little bit of red meat. I don't think anyone needs poultry, but if you're going to have it, that would be the kind to get. Some people really need a little bit of red meat, but I say a little bit. You know, instead of a quarter pounder, we're talking about a few ounces, and of course smothered in vegetables.
Right.
So I think if you crave it, you probably need it. If you want to have it every once in a while for a holiday or a company or a special occasion, go ahead and do it. But just make sure that at least 80% of your diet is coming from the plant kingdom, and preferably 50 or more percent of your diet is uncooked.
Okay. That has to do with your blood type too, right? Like the blood type
true.
diet.
I think people get a little crazy about eating right for your blood type, but I can tell you that I have seen some broad brushstrokes that are relevant for my patients. I've had breast cancer patients that have gone on totally vegetarian diets and they're frail and pale and weak and they fail to thrive, I find out that they are type O, and I have to fight with them to put a little bit of high quality lean red meat in their diet, and they perk right up. If people don't want to do the red meat, and I've got a few articles on my website now about meat, and the research just came out from the World Health Organization about red meat and cancer. So if you don't want to do that, you could have at least a little bit of animal protein, like some wild fish or some eggs or something like that.
Right. I'm so glad you said that, because that people who are vegetarian and who need a little meat in their diet, it could be dangerous. And I'm a type O, so I know that I need a little bit of beef in my diet.
Right, and not only that, but type O's notoriously are very poor starch metabolizers. So if you're doing grains, don't do very many of them.
No, I don't actually.
Exception, quinoa and buckwheat, you do pretty well with those, but other grains, type O's do not do well with.
Interesting. Okay. I'm a quinoa person. Okay, so Kim is asking, where is a good place to begin so as not to be overwhelmed with trying to do everything at once?
I'm so glad, Kim, you asked that question, because I don't want you to be overwhelmed. Even if you're dealing with advanced cancer, I don't want you to be overwhelmed, because then you're not going to stick with the program. And if you hate your life, what's the point of fighting to get well, right?
Right.
So good question. Here's what I say. You heard this lecture, and this is the first thing that I want people to learn about. And then choose your battles. Pick one thing you're willing to change. I don't care what I mention that appeals to you as your very first step, and only do that one step until it becomes integrated into your lifestyle, whether it's a couple of days or weeks, or if it even takes you months to integrate that one change. That's what I want you to do. And then you go to step 2. The rungs of the ladder of nutritional sophistication are just overwhelming. I've been climbing for 38 years, and every time I get to the top, there's more rungs. So you can always do better. Right. The good news is that nature only gave us one mouth and 6 or 7 eliminatory organs, so we don't have to get it perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
So just start somewhere.
Pick something, anything that appeals to you, and put that into your lifestyle, and then go on to the next thing.
Okay, great. Donna asks, what are your thoughts on the green supplements, powders in place of fresh, for using in smoothies?
I think that's fine. Some people will buy these freshwater algae powders, cereal grass powders. That's great. Some will buy juiced wheatgrass frozen in a freezer. That's great. Some will swallow cereal grass tablets or spirulina or chlorella tablets. That's great. They do bring extra nutrients that we don't necessarily get just from our salad greens and our green vegetables. But whatever you do, as long as you're moving in the alkaline direction and in the four fundamental principles direction, I'm satisfied. That said, if you are a person fighting cancer and you've made lots of progress and you want more fine-tuning, do feel free to call our center, 888-551-2223. We can set you up with a telephone counseling session, no charge, just whatever you want to donate. We can go through your diet with a fine-tooth comb, and then we can go through every other aspect of your life as well.
Is that for anybody, Susan, or just people that have been diagnosed with cancer?
We work with cancer patients. Our staff is too small to handle everyone who would like to talk with us. So we work with cancer patients, those who are in remission and wish to keep it that way, those who are actively in treatment, and every once in a while you can convince us that you're from a high-risk family and you need to get help right away. Since the cancer rate is 1 in 2 Americans in terms of lifetime risk, I guess everyone's at high risk, but we do what we can do.
Right, yes, I understand. Dee wants to know, what is the best whole house water system?
I've seen a lot of value to the RO systems, reverse osmosis. That doesn't mean it will be high pH, but it can be quite pure. Some people will go with distilled water, and that is very, very clean water, and it's very good at chelating toxins out of the body. And so there are a lot of different systems. I don't know that I could say which one is the best one. There are financial considerations as well. But if you will supplement, if you will not drink tap water, first of all, get the best quality water you can, and then make sure that you have several glasses of alkaline water during the day between meals. I think you're going to be well on your way. There is a article on our website, if you type in drinking water, that will talk about bottled water choices and the 8 factors that you might want to consider before you make a choice.
Okay. If you can't afford a whole house water system, is a Brita water filter or a zero water filter better than just using tap water? Are they?
Everything's better than just using tap water, but I have to say that if you can do better than those, I would recommend it. Okay. Everything is about balance. You know, if you are eating a totally acid diet or a lot of junk food, and of course nobody interested in this webinar could possibly fall in that category, but if you were to be eating that way, then you don't want to make yourself crazy trying to solve the confusing water quality issue when you have larger pieces of your puzzle that need to be put in place, and you need to set up a framework just like you're doing a puzzle, and you get all the outside first and then you deal with the details in between.
Okay. How about organic versus local grown? This person says she likes to support her local farmers.
You know, I like to support local farmers too, but I have to say that if they are using pesticides, the research is just too terrifying. And so at the very least, if you're not getting all organic through your local farms, but you want to occasionally support them, I would say support them with the purchase of foods that have these heavy rinds, like or skins, or peels, well, no bananas are grown locally probably, but you know, if it's avocados or watermelons or cantaloupes or things like that, where you get to peel that would be something that I could live with. But if you're eating the skin, I would still pick, and I go through that same struggle. I want to support local, but I need organic. Sometimes you get lucky and you find local organic. That's ideal.
Right, yeah. Joanne wants to know if you can please provide the website URL again.
For beatcancer.org.
Yes.
That's it.
Beatcancer.org.
Center for Advancement in Cancer Education is our legal name of our nonprofit, and beatcancer.org, for obvious reasons, has been a lot easier for people to remember, and it is our website.
Okay. How about protein powders? Dee wants to know, can you recommend the best protein powder, or do you have a recommendation?
Yes, there are about 6 or 8 excellent protein powders. If you email me info@beatcancer.org, I will send you a list of them. We don't want the ones with whey in them, and I prefer to have dairy-free, gluten-free, and soy-free protein powders, and I do have a list, so I can send that to people.
Okay, great, thank you. Can we do 2 more?
Sure.
Okay, so Sarah says, building on Sandra's question with regard to the WHO announcement regarding meat and cancer, do you draw a distinction between factory farmed meat, fed grains and antibiotics, and grass-fed animals with regard to cancer?
We do. We do.
Mm-hmm.
The cooking method is also relevant. So obviously the charred cooked meat is really bad.
Right.
Um, and and then if they are cured and they have preservatives in them, then they are at the absolute worst end of the spectrum.
Okay. We'll do one last one. Sarah says, RO, I guess reverse osmosis and distilled waters actually leach the body's resident minerals and leave you depleted. So I guess adding those back into distilled water?
Well, the truth is that we have a lot of mineral deposits in our systems that we don't need, and heavy metals and things like that. But nature's distilled water is vegetable juices, so that's always going to be my first choice. If you're having a lot of extracted vegetable juices, then you're not only getting, especially if they're from organic vegetables, then you're not only getting the juice, but you're also getting essentially the best water you could get.
Okay.
It's filled with minerals.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your questions. And I'd just like to say that if you enjoyed this presentation, visit beatcancer.org website. The information is just fantastic. And if in this Breast Cancer Awareness Month, or as we like to say, Breast Health Awareness, with all the pink washing going on, if you want to donate to a nonprofit that is really doing some good, I urge you to donate to beatcancer.org. As you can see, they are dedicated to helping people get well, stay well, and be well. And Susan, thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And so next month, Joel Auerbach of the National Association for Laser Therapy will be talking to us about smoking cessation with the use of lasers. We've had it done in our office. Well, we've had some patients that did it in our office, and it's really quite amazing. 3-pack a day, hardcore smokers leave as non-smokers. So we hope you'll join us for that. Thank you, everyone. And again, Susan, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Good night, everyone.
You are most welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.